Hey, welcome back to This Week in Pharmacy. I am the host of this show. Funny story, real quick, is this is my own first show. People, I say that all the time, people don't get it. When I first built the Pharmacy Podcast, it was the Pharmacy Podcast Network, and I never had a show under that network. And I only discovered that about 10 shows in when I kept adding people and shows. And so for This Week in Pharmacy, I like to say TWIRx. We like to TWIRx while we're here. Just give us something. Sanjay has to give us, he just gives us a little one. Sanjay. There you go. See, at least he has something. So, you know what I mean? We are here for part 3. This is an opportunity to build, to understand influence, understand branding, understand what it is to start a podcast. And I have podcast power couple back for part number 3, Anisha Patel and Sanjay Viaz. And I'm going to kick it off to Sanjay first. How many times have you, especially paying clients, so this is a nightmare story right out of the gate, for all you that want to start podcasts, how about this? How many times have you been ready to podcast and some technical issue comes up where you're like, you can't hear someone, or if there's an echo or there's something broken? Like, how many times has that happened to you?
I don't have enough fingers and toes. Look, I've lost all of that because of it. Yeah, look, it happens. You know, it happens when I'm not even with just paying clients, but even when we're just doing podcasts with regular, shouldn't say regular folk, but, you know, people that are not podcasters who are just using their laptop, and they use it for Teams and they use it for Zoom every day, and they're using the same tech, and then they come onto Riverside, they come onto some new platform, and suddenly it's like, you know, computer says no. The audience won't get that. There's a comedy show here which the computer says no, but yeah, the computer says no, and it just doesn't want to play ball. That's technology. How many times has people's laptops crash? How many times is your phone frozen? You know, it happens, but you roll with the punches.
It's part of the game, Anisha. It never fails for me. Something will happen. I notice a difference between Zoom is, for me, from my experience, Zoom is this mule of a system. It's this hearty, rah, rah. There's no polish to it. But it works for everybody. Like I can get everybody connected to it. But when I started using more complex systems and fancier systems like this, like StreamYard, when I have the same people come to StreamYard versus Zoom, sometimes I can't hear them. Like I'll sit there and try to figure out what is going on with the connections and why I can connect to Zoom all the time. So what's your experience been with like different systems? Which one's the easiest to use?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Zoom have somehow figured out a way of just making it work. And yes, I agree with you. It's clunky. A mule is a good terminology. The quality's terrible. You know, It compresses your audio, but does a very good job of canceling out, you know, keyboard taps and all the background. Is very, very aggressive with the suppression. Excuse me. But it has figured out a way of working. Usually what happens is when you start to, and this is why I say don't use Zoom for podcasts, because when you step up to something like Riverside, something like StreamYard, which we're on now, you have more control because you want that control, right? You want to, when you have a microphone, like we're all using external microphones here. We're all wearing headsets. Anisha's got a kind of a in-ear ones. We want to have control to say, hey, make sure the audio goes in this way that I'm telling you. Whereas Zoom is kind of designed for, hey, just let me hear the person, let me speak to the person, right? So that's why you kind of tend to fall into these issues, and that's why these issues tend to happen. But if you're doing your own podcast, you'll soon get to learn whatever platform it is that you've chosen to use, and you'll figure out its kinks. So yeah, like I said, you will get different mileage with different systems, but it's usually user error. Okay, I say that with with all the compassion in the world, because you just need to figure out how to change the setting. And often for me, the best thing to do is to learn, because there's different settings, right? There's settings and an app level, right? So we'll call this an app, right? StreamYard is the app. So you
Yep.
can change the settings within StreamYard at an app level, but there's also the global settings from your laptop or your computer. So if you're using a Mac, it'll be Mac OS. If you're using Windows, there'll be Windows OS settings
Yep.
baked in. My advice is to learn how to change those global level settings, because often they override some of the app settings sometimes. So if you can know, okay, I'm having issues here, always go back to your whatever device you're using and know how to change your microphone and your headphone settings there, and then go to your app. Because if you're trying to have two different sets of settings, your laptop saying one thing, at an app level you're trying to change things to another one, then you've got a conflict already. And whereas Zoom's kind of good at just negating that. I don't know how they do it. Some sort of voodoo magic that they have, but it works.
Anisha, it's part 3 of this series that you and I came up with in the summer. We really wanted to do something. We weren't sure what it was. I've been so honored that you've been part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. You've expanded our reach into other sectors of the world. You are a powerhouse. I really admire what you've built through Pharmacist Diaries, and now the expertise that you understand in building a podcast is coming, and we're going to keep repeating it, and we're going to put this into a 3-part series on a landing page and get it out there. So if you're listening, you didn't get to hear Anisha in part 1 or 2, no problem. But what are we learning today for part 3?
Oh, I'm excited. So last week and the week before, we talked about the idea, brainstorming the idea, figuring out what your name is, looking at whether or not you can find social media handles and a website page if you want to kind of purchase a website page. And then we actually talked about whether or not you choose audio versus video, what the cadence is like, and just the basics in terms of the room setup, how you can make your audio sound a lot better. And today I really want to dive into kind of the juicy bits, which is actually getting into the whole recording element, so the actual content creation. And then once you've recorded the episodes, obviously we will focus a little bit on editing and then the production side of things, and getting those episodes published and sharing your voice with the world.
Yep. And we keep saying, and this is true, that Anisha has a cheat code on her team. That is a cheat code SUNJAY, the Sunjay cheat code. So when I think of, I always say 1 through 10s because it helps me get people into understanding each other. So if I said to someone, even if someone spoke a different language, if I could communicate, if you're in pain, is it a pain level 1 or is it a pain level 10, right? Well, when I think of technical and I say this to my clients all the time: podcast technicality, podcast technical equipment, podcast software, I rate myself a very strong 6. Okay. Coming in at 6. So I kind of know things a little bit, blah, 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 but there's some advanced things that I don't know. So Anisha, where do you rate yourself in the technical side of podcasting?
Shoot, Todd, if you're 6, I'm like a 4, like screwed. I was actually going to say I'm 5 or 6 compared to the general public, but now that you've set the bar at 6, I'm downgrading to 4.
I'm a good faker. I fake it good. Like, you wouldn't see, Sanjay, you wouldn't know I didn't really know I was a 6. You probably thought maybe I was an 8, right?
Dude, you got a multicam switcher thing going on there. You're faking now, saying that you're 6. That's what you're doing.
I think I actually need to go down to 2.
And you're scaring the people that are listening. They're thinking, geez, if these guys are 6 and he runs a network, come on, what chance have we got? Look, I think it depends on where you're at, right? And what like I said, you've got a quite complicated setup there. So yeah, maybe you're a 6 with regards to your setup. But if you're just sitting there with your laptop and a pair of headphones, and a basic microphone, then you don't need to be at that level. So
Yes,
it's a
I
good point, but it does depend on what your ecosystem is, right? The more complex the car, the harder it is to drive, right? Driving a Formula One car is
true.
very, very difficult. Right? If you take a Civic with auto transmission, and it's going to be super easy. So
Yep. That's a good analogy because I always want to I want to layer up myself. So I'm a very transparent person. So I use the very first nice deck that I bought. Not deck. See, I'm using the wrong terminology. Mixer was the Roadcaster. That was the first one. Now I have the Roadcaster 2. So Roadcaster 1 is in the new studio. Roadcaster 2 is here. I do not know how to use the Roadcaster 2. Like I use probably 10, 20% of it. Whereas I want these buttons to do things and I want to be able to press something to put in like a little sound variable. But I don't have a Sanjay cheat code. So it's like I rely on Brady, and Brady is remote, so we're not in the same house. But let's go through some of the stuff that you were talking about, Anisha, because I want to jump into this. I want to jump into the next stages, and the stage that is the most fun for me, it is the most fun for you, is the actual recording. So talk to us, take us into that.
Yeah, so the content creation part is the exciting part, and it's my jam because that's what I like doing. And Pharmacist Diaries has evolved significantly since the start of my journey, where I was, yeah, it was different to what I do now. And I love making the improvements and the changes, and also making the alterations that my audience like to see, or trialing something to see if my audience like it, and trying to get that feedback from them. But when you're in the early stages of setting up your podcast, you've come up with the name, you've got this idea, you've got themes that you might want to cover within that podcast. I think the best way to start is to potentially brainstorm ideas of up to 10 episodes that you could record. Now, if you're doing solo, it's obviously a little bit easier if you're brainstorming on your own, because you're the one in control of the content that's going to go out to the world. If you're recording with a guest or you're interviewing someone like I do, it's a slightly different workflow because you have to work with them. So initially, I used to find a guest, reach out to them, send them an email, confirm that they're happy to come on the podcast. I would meet them virtually because my guests are from all over the world, and have a just general chat about their pharmacy career or the changes they've had, and all the kind of obstacles they've been through, achievements, and I would just document some of that information. I would look at their LinkedIn as an example, or any social media they have, to try and fish out more information. You'd be surprised how many pharmacists actually have websites, so I can actually really kind of dive into their About Me page and learn more about them. But once we have that conversation, it helps me to identify some questions I might want to ask, and I used to actually send the questions out to the guest. Now, with pharmacists, I find that if you start sending out questions, it does feel more like a very professional pharmacy Q&A session, and the pharmacist that you get on the interview is very different to the casual conversation that and kind of love about Pharmacist Diaries, where you feel like you're literally a fly on the wall, listening to two people have a coffee and enjoy getting to know each other, where there's curiosity. The conversation is very organic. We go into all sorts of directions, but obviously the main thing is their pharmacy journey. So I started learning a little bit about that. Plus, I didn't want it to be as scripted. So I have now kind of molded to not asking questions specifically, unless the guest really feels like they need it to help them understand like themes that are going to come up. But in general, I'm like, we're just going to get to know each other, enjoy the curiosity, and boom, like create something magic. And I like that style. It works for me. But I think in the early days, it's also nice to give them some information, and for you to also have structure about how you're going to record an episode as well. But if you're doing solo, it's completely different, because you'll be doing your own preparation, you'll be doing your own research about the specific topics that you want to talk about, and you will outline that in a way that suits you. So for me, if I am to do solo episodes, and I've done a few that are audio only, I document all my ideas on a Google document, and I tend to overwrite and overcomplicate things, and then I try and turn those into bullet points. And then each bullet point will just give me ideas or examples of things that I want to raise in conversation. For some people, they literally need like, a post-it note, and they write down a few ideas and then boom, they just get into it. So I guess it depends on your experience, how comfortable you are, again, what type of content that you're giving. If you're a pharmacist and you want to give, you know, evidence-based research about a specific medication or a group of drugs, and you're trying to simplify that for your audience so they can understand the evidence and research behind clinical trials or things, then obviously you might need to document a lot more information. But if you are a pharmacist who's got loads and loads of experience in, I don't know, pain management or respiratory diseases like COPD, and you know that topic inside out, you could wing it and just give out information that you would give to your patients in maybe 10 to 15 minutes, maybe the side effects of a drug or interactions or how you manage that condition. You could completely freestyle it. So it really depends on the topic that you're creating. I think also the other thing to consider when you're creating the actual content is that you want to have an intro to your podcast. So as part of your creation process, it's really important to have an introduction, because not everyone listens to every single episode that you have. Each time that someone finds you, they may find you at episode 25 or episode 50 or episode 1. So you want to make an introduction to who you are, as well as what the podcast is all about. I have a pre-recorded intro. It has cool music and it really showcases my personality and gives a deep dive in less than a minute about who I am and what I want to achieve if they're watching or listening. And then recently I've started to add other things into it, which people can add in as part of their content creation process. I've got a newsletter as an example, and I want people to join my newsletter. I want people to learn that I am really passionate about mentoring you to start your own podcast. And they might not find that on social media. They may not even have seen my website yet. So if they've literally just found me through the Apple Podcast app, or they're on Spotify, or a friend told them about me, and they just randomly download an episode, they learn lots of things about what I'm about, as well as kind of what I'm offering. When I record podcast episodes with a guest, which is my style, and I do them virtually, a lot of the time Sanjay really helps me in terms of supporting me with what the room looks like and setting up the camera. So it's a case of then I log on to Squadcast, or Descript is what we use to kind of record virtually, log into the system and wait for my guest to show up and make sure that our sound, audio, all of our equipment's kind of set up. If I have problems, I try my best to kind of figure that out on my own or help my guest to figure that out. But I think managing my time by including a little bit more within the kind of like recording time, so we're not pressured to feel like we have to fix this ASAP so we can get to recording. So I give 90 minutes for my podcast episodes, so that we have that time to say hello, figure out the audio, and then boom, get into it. Or if we lose internet connection, that's happened
Yeah.
many times, that I'm recording an episode and suddenly someone's internet has died and the whole episode's just fallen to pieces, and it's quite stressful. It's really stressful. And when you're not super tech savvy, it's even more overwhelming. So it can be quite frustrating. But I think it's part and parcel of learning and figuring out that you're going to face a lot of obstacles on the journey, but they can be overcome.
Yep.
And you can learn on the journey. I mean, I logged in today, right, and I had some tech issues and I was struggling.com, but Sanjay came to my rescue, so I was obviously saved. But I'd like to defend myself from that point of view, is that he has quite a fancy tech setup for me, and a tech setup that I don't generally feel like super comfortable with.
Mhm.
So as soon as there's a problem, I do get a little bit overwhelmed with understanding how to fix it, because I haven't fully learned how to use the equipment.
Yep.
So it's a little bit challenging, but he would prefer that I would figure things out, because I got to learn, right? I got to figure it out, and I've got to get better at doing things kind of on my own. And then when we have
Let me just stop you for just a second because I want the listeners to understand something. You're talking to people that have saturated in the form of communication, which is now podcasting, is now hot, that have done it forever. And there are things that I do not explain to clients and to people I'm trying to help, to some of my new hosts, that I should be explaining, but my brain is in 16-year podcast land, and I forget all the stuff that I've learned over the years in the worst way possible. If I should do a comedy show about how often Todd tried to do something in podcasting and it probably didn't work because I taught myself everything from Blog Talk Radio, dialing the 800 number to do a horrible sounding podcast, to implementing my first fancy microphone. So I want to give you some encouragement. Understand that you are going to mess up. You are going to have technical issues. You're going to have guests that are late. You're going to have guests that have the most horrible sounding audio. You're going to have issues with yourself. I mean, you're going to have internet will go down or the power will go down. Don't allow that to knock you off of your understanding that it's a process. Just like when you're sitting with a patient and the patient didn't tell you, did you tell me every med that you're on, Mr. Jones? Yes. So you're only on 4 medications? Yes. All right, so we're going to go through this medication analysis. You spend 30 minutes. All of a sudden he goes, oh, you know what? I forgot another medication I'm on. And the pharmacist is like, what the heck? Like what? So you understand as a clinician, as a provider, that you're going to run into issues in treatment along the way. And that's the exact same thing that you're going to go through in podcasting. There's going to be elements in growth and thinking it through. What I like is now the network is strengthened by people like Anisha and Sanjay, who are going to give our hosts guidance. They're going to give their clients guidance. People that just want to start a podcast. I want to give a shout out to commercial organizations. If you want a course to strengthen your team's content developers, we're talking about press release writing. We're talking about forming better sounding presentations, better training programs. Training through podcast is a huge future. Anisha and Sanjay can get involved in turnkey systems like that, and then give me the ones that are public, and I'll blow it up through the Pharmacy Podcast Network, or keep it to yourself for your staff or for training. But tell us, Anisha, just in simple steps of where do we go from we collected the audio. Now, when does it start getting technical? And when you start that, I'm going to pass the buck to Mr. Jedi of technical himself over there, Sanjay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm nearly there. We've got, you've got your interview or your solo episode scripted. You're going to try it out. If you're doing it for the first time, it's not going to be perfect. You might not love the way you sounded. The good thing is that obviously some of that can be edited in the background. So if you say a few sentences, you mess them up and you repeat them, just keep the recording going and you can edit them in the background once the episode is done. But I think don't be a perfectionist like pharmacists tend to be. Accept that some episodes aren't going to feel like 100%, but re-listen to the content that you've created, whether you're in the car or whether you are at your kind of laptop listening to it. Re-listen to it once it's published and critique what worked well, what didn't work well, what could you do better next time? Because the only way you're going to improve is to figure out what you could do. And for me personally, I try to just use this 1% every single time. I try to listen to a lot of my episodes back. I think even my daughter is sick of hearing my voice in the car, but I tend to listen to a lot of episodes. Even my 2-year-old now knows, hey, mummy's on the radio. But I do listen to the episodes. I'm not, massively tuning in, but every now and again, like I hear something I've said, or maybe I've asked a question to my guest, but I repeated it twice in different ways and it wasn't really necessary. And instead of just pausing and waiting for them to respond, I filled the gap by kind of just saying it again and just flustering. And so I try to learn from those sort of mistakes that I make, or kind of those frustrations that I have in the moment, and try and move one step forward. But once you have recorded it, wherever that may be, and actually Sanjay might want to go into that, where would we actually record solo episodes versus
Yep.
interviews? What do we do with the recording once we've stopped it?
So before we get to that, I think it's important to, and Anisha kind of said it, keeping it simple, not wanting to over-edit. I think one of the most important things you can do is record with the edit in mind. And what that means is you shouldn't have to do too much editing to the actual audio or the video, because you should be taking some of these steps beforehand. So the simple things that we've discussed in previous episodes are like having an external microphone, right? Having a set of headphones.
Yep.
These things will already level up the quality of your audio, because I'm a big advocate for video podcasts now, but podcasts is an audio first medium. I'll say that till the cows come home, and I'll never make no apologies for that. So you want to make sure your audio is right. And the microphone is one thing, your recording environment is another, right? So if you're in a room which has a lot of hard surfaces, it's echoey, your bathroom is a good example of this, right? If you're ever taking a phone call in your bathroom, you'll know what that sounds like. And that's not what you want for your podcast. You want it to sound professional. So having lots of soft furnishings in the room, a lot of people, they probably still do actually audio only podcasts, they record in their closets, right?
Yes.
In their clothing closets.
That's what I used to tell. That's what I told all my hosts. I said, do you want to sound like you're in a studio? Yes. Take your Yeti microphone. You're going to be hot, so dress in shorts, and something. And I want you to shut the door in your step-in closet with all of those wonderful coats and wonderful dresses, and you're going to sound like you're in a padded studio. And they close to the mic, and it was great. It always sounded good.
Just doesn't work for video, unfortunately. But
right.
It could work depending on your look. But so that's what I mean by recording with the audio, recording with the edit in mind, right? Making sure your environment. I used to, even though I was recording video, I would stuff pillows and cushions, where you can't see behind the camera here. So when I'm talking this way, I'm not getting reflection. Now I have a sound blanket and different things as well. So recording with the edit in mind will mean that you don't have to do too much editing to the audio. When it does come to editing your audio, and I know you should talk about where to record. I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, let's get into that first. Where are you going to record this? Well, we've already mentioned where we are today. We're on StreamYard. That's a great platform. Makes it easy. You can record the video. You can record the audio. Don't use Zoom. Listen to the previous episodes. I've talked about this a lot. It's just not great for audio. It's not great for video. If it's all you've got, and if there's the difference between you actually starting on not starting, okay, cool, use Zoom, but let's try and level up from that very, very quickly. There are platforms like Riverside. Again, none of this is sponsored, but Riverside is a very popular platform. Descript is a very popular platform. If you're doing solo episodes and you're just doing audio, then you can use free software like Audacity, which is excellent. The only trouble I find with Audacity for newcomers, it's very overwhelming. It's a professional audio recording and editing software, right? So you fire that up for the first time, and it's like stepping into that Formula One car. It's like, oh, what do I press? Where do I go? So I think there are easier ways of doing that than going into Audacity, but you could use Audacity. So this is where, and I've said this before, this is where you'll probably have to make a little bit of investment. You might have to pay a subscription fee, because you get what you pay for, right? So if you're going to try and go the free route, then even with Zoom on the free route, you're still limited to 45 minutes, which maybe suffice for some people. But let's get into the editing. So one thing that I used to do when we first started podcasting, when I first started my podcast and Anisha did, I would really go to town with the editing, right? And I mean like cutting out every and R and mouth noises and breathing noises and all of that stuff. And there are still people that do that to this day. I think I don't see the value in that right now. I think as long as your audio sounds good, it's not echoey, it's not, you know, reverby, it doesn't sound like you're in that bathroom, then allowing kind of some natural, it's a natural part of conversation. We've probably said it a million times already in the 3 episodes that we've done together. These filler words happen. And yes, there is AI now which removes, Descript has a tool now which can remove filler words, and it's quite scary because it obviously detects how many times you use filler words. So that's quite an interesting exercise to record an episode and say, oh, I've said and ah like 500 times. But when I've just hit one button and removed it all, and I listen back to the episode, it sounds robotic, right? It doesn't sound natural a lot of the time. So I think don't get too caught up in the perfectionism of making it sound that way. Yes, okay, people might say, well, but when I listen to a professional radio host or you watch a TV presenter, you know, they don't use these words. Well, they have teleprompters, right? Yep. They have tools to stop them from using those filler words. And when it's just you and I, all of us here, we're sitting here, we don't have that technology, or we have them available. We're not using it for our podcast.
Yep.
So the editing side of it, you know, you may come across a situation where I did it today, right? I coughed, right? Or someone might have happen to Anisha. She said a coughing fit in the middle of an episode. And I mean, it went on for like 2 minutes. You know, it was a serious coughing fit. So there may be things like that you need to take out. So that's where your editing is gonna go into when it comes to the audio. Again, your platform that you choose, this is where the investment comes in, will allow you to do that editing. I'm not familiar with StreamYard or what their editing tools are like, but I know, for example, with Riverside, they have a phenomenal suite of editing tools. You can edit via the transcripts, you can edit via the text, you can edit via the timeline, you can edit the audio. Descript, very similar. That's their whole philosophy is around editing the video and audio like it's a Word document, right? Like it's just text. You literally just highlight things, delete, and it's disappeared, it's gone. So editing has become, again, since the days of just since I've started doing video editing even in the last 2-3 years, it's come a long, long way. And it's become so much easier for anybody, and I mean anybody, to just pick up that software and edit your video podcast. So this is why I say there's really no excuse. If you can afford the subscription, there's really no excuse to not do the video. What is important is what the audio sounds like. So I would highly recommend you do apply some treatment to the audio portion of the podcast. Again, the software now has this built in. So Descript has something called Studio Sound. It's literally a toggle. You press the toggle, and it takes a little bit of processing power, because what it's doing is it's analyzing your audio. It's removing background noise. So similar to what Zoom does, but it does it. It's a lot less aggressive, right? It's a lot less. It's a much nicer way of doing it. It takes out background noise. It takes out echo. Takes out reverb. Riverside has what's it called? Magic Sound. I think it's there's another term for it. I can't remember. I think it's Magic Sound. But there's a lot of this is built into the software now, where you can just process that sound. And then there are external tools which you can get into as well. But I think that just trying to stick with what's readily available is easy. Phonic is the one that comes to mind that I've used for the longest time. And you simply would just upload your audio file or even your video file, and it will just analyze the audio for you. And it's AI basically. So it just goes through and it knows what your voice is. It has voice isolation. DaVinci Resolve has a voice isolation feature, which you toggle it, and it literally removes background noise. In fact, if people are interested, go onto our YouTube channel, Anisha and I, at Anisha and Sanjay on YouTube. And there's an episode that we did early on where we're sat in a hotel restaurant, and we're sat side by side with handheld Rode wireless microphones. And that episode, at the time of recording, we were in this, it was breakfast time, right? And you can hear there's plates clanging in the background. There are people talking, there's people chatting. There's a lot going on. They're working together, that one. So that one down in the bottom left corner, it says working together. So if you actually watch that episode and you listen to the audio, you wouldn't know we were sat in a restaurant where there's a lot of noise going on in the background. And all I did was I just used a lot of this AI, as I said, to just clean up the audio. And it did a phenomenal job of it. And at the time of recording, I didn't think it was going to do that good of a job. So I just thought, let's just do this and see what happens. And as I said, I was really amazed with the results. So yeah, you can see we're in a hotel environment there. So the technology is a lot better now at helping you to make your audio sound good. So I don't think that should be an excuse. And the reason I'm going on about this a lot is because people will forgive poor video quality as long as they can hear what's going on, but
True.
they will not forgive poor audio quality. People are more likely to switch off if they can't really hear what's going on or it sounds terrible. And if I put on a podcast and the audio is terrible, it irks me, it winds me up, because it's like, you should not be letting your podcast go out like that, right? There's no excuse now. There's such good tools available. So yeah, I won't park on too much about that. And in terms of video editing, again, you don't want to overcomplicate it, right? Just use the built-in features. Again, it's one click, right? Descript, it's a one click to edit your video. If you've got an interview style, we have a slightly more complicated workflow here because we have three of us. But if in Anisha's case, it's just her and a guest. Maybe we flick over to Anisha. Anisha, you've edited your episode, so mate, why don't you talk rather than me as a professional video editor? Talk about your experience of using. You've used Descript now. You've used you've mainly used Descript, right, for video editing. Tell us your experience of editing on those platforms.
Anisha, before you say something, one of our fans, who is one of the sweetest ladies that I met, and she's a content developer, Dr. New Throng, gave us a shout out. So I need these kinds of shout outs. It makes me gives me like energy when I get stuff like this.
Oh, hello, Dr. New. Happy Friday to you too. That's so cute. I love that. I love it when we get people to, actively chat with us in our live. It makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
I also wanted to, it was good that you asked me to talk about this, because you talked about Audacity being a little bit more of a professional way of editing and recording your audio. But I used this back in 2020 and I actually became pretty good at it. I recorded my introductions on there. I edited all of the music. I used to be able to actually, I guess, alter the sound as well so that it would really fade in and fade out. And I then added the audios from, the recording.
Hard to get your head around, right? You figured it out.
No, we figured it out. But what, obviously I did have you to support me, but I could have Googled it. And what I did was I just wrote it down, was like a 15-step checklist of all the things I needed to do for each and every episode. And then it was just a copy and paste of that. And then once I did maybe 10 episodes, it was already embedded in my memory and I could do it. It's like getting used to using a Microsoft Word or, Excel. Like once you get into it and try new things, you figure it out, and it worked. So that was good. But in the recent, I guess, couple of years of doing video podcasting, one of the reasons why I wanted to learn was, it's a great skill, but also I just felt like a lot of that burden was on Sanjay. And sometimes he was the bottleneck for my episodes being released into the world, because he's a full-time employee and having to edit an episode every single week. Or, last year I recorded 17 episodes across 3 days, and then I'm like just waiting for them to get edited. I was like, no, I need to figure out how to do it so I can support you. So he did the main edit, and then I would use Descript to create clips, and that was fun. Descript is really easy to use. It's a case of finding, interesting comments that have been made or catchy elements of the conversation that you think your audience are going to enjoy listening to, or maybe new people who are going to would find it intriguing or interesting or exciting or entertaining, whatever the conversation is about. It really depends. But finding snippets of information that are around 30 to 60 seconds long, and then you can do it through text. So you can literally just highlight the text that you want and create a new clip, and it will automatically create the clip. Then I used to add music sometimes. I would easily be able to add all the captions to it. For some time, I actually added a lot of additional, stock video footage within the app, which was fun and made the reels a little bit more entertaining. And I used it a lot for Instagram reels, because instead of just staring at me the whole time or my guest, there were, video clips that were useful, or little sound bites, or a bell sound. Those kind of things they were so easy. And I'm still using it to this day. But what has shifted for me, since some of these platforms have developed, and they are constantly changing, is that they've built AI into the platform. So now I literally click 2 buttons and I tell the script, I want 10 clips. I want them to be an average of 30 to 40 seconds. And within 20 seconds, it's given me 10 clips. Now, sometimes I don't like them. Sometimes I feel like I need to make them longer, and it does help you to figure that out. Sometimes I just delete them, and then I go back to the episode and fish out things that I personally want. But you can also tell the AI what to do. So there's literally, you can type in, I want to highlight everything about entrepreneurship in my clips, and it will find all of that content for you. So it's so easy. And then I save it on my Google Drive, and then I find a way to schedule that into my social media, which obviously we can go into once we've completed the production part.
Well, I just want to bring up being salty to the rest of these newbies out there, but you guys have so much that I did not have in 2009 in podcast world. And if I did, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'd be a millionaire by now. No, I'm just teasing. But yeah, it's a trek. Be patient, learn. YouTube has so much content out on it about how to do something, but join an organization, join a group, join people like Anisha and what she's invested in. And for example, behind the mic, if you go to behindthemic.anishaandsanjay.com, I'm going to have this link in our show notes, but it's behindthemic.anishaandsanjay.com. This is an entire environment that Anisha and Sanjay have invested in to continue to grow a knowledge base and camaraderie and networking. And that's what I want to come to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Is not only are we going to help amplify your voice, but we're going to start having sessions like this 3-part session. The next one I'd like to have, I didn't even talk to Sanjay and Anisha about this yet, is a master's class for the advanced podcaster who wants to get into making money. And I know I will bet, I'm going to stand out here and hopefully maybe this won't be true, this statement, but I think it is. I think I've made more money in pharmacy podcasting than probably anybody at least in the United States, specific to the industry, and this is 16 years of trek. And it's amazing how I've taught my hosts to dial in and to make money. A shout out to Bruce Nealon. He knows how to sell podcasting. He knows now how to sell it as an identifier. He knows how to bring more value to it. He knows how to brand it and write into it. So this is just the beginning. This is kind of that first step that you're going to have to think of building one. Don't go it alone. I want you to reach out to Sanjay and Anisha. They're accessible via LinkedIn. Actually, LinkedIn, they have an entire environment that is behind the mic. and it's the backstage pass to all things podcasting. It's amazing. It's already been set up. This thing has been just growing leaps and bounds. You have almost 3,000 subscribers already. Congratulations, Anisha and Sanjay, in growing this. This is a great resource.
Well, thank you for that. With regards to the newsletter, thank you for sharing the link for that. I have been using it for most of January, and the most incredible humans have joined this newsletter. I share a lot about my personal story with podcasting, Pharmacist Diaries, the growth I've had, and the way that the newsletter works is it is a step-by-step guide. So of course you get an introduction to us and our lives and personal things that we like to share. I write most of the content unless I want something text specific, then I ask Sanjay to hop in. But I really like being creative with my writing, and I really like to connect with my community and my audience. And I have had the most incredible emails back from the people who've joined the newsletter. I mean, paragraphs and paragraphs of email where people have shared that this is the ticket that they needed to take the next step. Like, this is the perfect opportunity for them to be, I guess, like, receive information in such a fun format in their emails, a step-by-step guide. And I've had multiple virtual conversations with these individuals. Of course, they're mainly pharmacists, but pharmacists from all over the world who are thinking like, I should do it. I know I should do it. I really want to do it. And I've been thinking about it for so long, and I just haven't taken that next step. And you've been the person to help me to get there. And that makes me so happy. Like, that makes me so excited. So the newsletter means a lot to me. So if you're thinking about it, get in.
I want to just give a shout out to fellow podcaster Jeremy Counts. A lot of what he develops is tied into PBM reform. He's one of the powerhouses in the pharmacy profession regarding punching PBMs right in the mouth. And he left us a comment. It says, going live is an event. It always has technical disasters. Anytime you leave your studio, expect the unexpected. And oh my gosh, brother Jeremy, that's exactly what happens. I take the show on the road. Once again, Pharmacy Podcast Network has been press partner for, my goodness, since our very first show we covered was 2016. And I've covered anywhere from 2 to 12 shows in a year between that time, over and over and over again. And every time I went to a show, I would improve on something. And Sanjay, I went from lugging 2 or 3 suitcases to now having this one medium-sized suitcase carries 100% of how I have become so efficient and so specific in how I can pop up a podcast studio somewhere and have quality sound and be able to capture the client, the segments that the client wanted. And it's become an amazing business. It's an extension of us as a podcast network, but more importantly, as a public relations and gong for messaging out there that that is not getting enough coverage. And we cover it and get it out there.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, even then, I've got to that point as well. I do a lot of on the road podcasting as well, and video podcasts at that. So I still haven't quite mastered a medium suitcase. I need to work towards that. But things can still go wrong. Or we did a podcast in one of the hospitals that Anisha worked at, and I had everything meticulously planned. I had backup, audio. I had backup cameras. I had everything ready, and everything was going smoothly. And we couldn't control the lights in the room because they were on sensors. And as soon as someone moved, the light switched on. I mean, you can't control. Well, we eventually did, but Jeremy, I hear you, man. That's anything can go wrong. But let's get back to the editing. I think just get your episode out there. It's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. This is a practice, right? It's like anything that you do. It is a practice. So get the reps in. Just go through the motions. Anisha, you made a good point of having that checklist when you were doing your Audacity editing. take a leaf out of the airline books, right? They created something called a flight checklist. I can't remember what this was. They did some research on this. After they created a pre-flight checklist, guess what happened? The number of incidents in the air, number of accidents went down, right? Surgeons have a pre-surgery checklist, right? Once they started going through those, and how many times have we all been on a plane? But we hear they go through the same drill over and over and over again. Why? Because there's a reason for it, to stop mistakes from happening. So once you figure out what your flow is, write it down, right? Stick it where you're going to see it, memorize it, whatever it is, read it to yourself before you go to bed every night. But having that checklist is going to just make your life so much easier and stop that overwhelm. I kind of know it meant just even now when we were having technical issues before we started this, I was going through my mental, I saw in my head now, but okay, has this happened? Have we done this? Have we done this? And then eventually we figured it out, right? So you will figure it out. So have a checklist, don't overcomplicate it. Get the edit done, use the software, use AI, and then that kind of extends on to kind of what else you want to be thinking about, because you're not just creating this asset, which is a video or an audio asset, right? You want to be thinking about the copy, right? So your show notes. This is a really crucial part of what goes along with your podcast, because you're putting your podcast out onto these platforms, onto Apple Podcasts, onto YouTube, onto Spotify, wherever you are, but you want to have a way for people to find you, and your copy, your show notes, your description is going to be part of that. And again, you're so lucky now, excuse me, that you have AI. You can take the transcript. A lot of these platforms will give you a transcript. You literally upload the transcript into AI and say, hey, turn this into show notes for me, and it'll do a relatively good job. Now, you could just rely on that. I personally don't recommend you do that, because from my understanding, Google have started to figure out when content is purely AI generated and it won't come up in search results. Right. So you want to make sure that you do change it. You do add your style to it. You can do things like style guides, and we can, it's getting more complicated, but get something. Don't just, I see a lot of podcasts with just, this week we talk about turning the lights on. That's it. Yep. Right. Make your show more discoverable. And I think that kind of goes on to the marketing side as well, which if we have time, we can talk about. But using show notes, we talked about a website previously, right? Making sure that you upload that onto it, whether you have a dedicated website or whether you're using your Podbean website or whether you're using your Spotify, in the URL that they give you. Make sure when someone goes onto that page and they click on an episode, there is information there, right? They can read, okay, this is what it is. Or they've got links to, okay, so today we're speaking to Anisha, Sanjay, and Todd. Make sure that your LinkedIn links are there. Maybe your Instagram handles are there. Maybe, wherever you want people to find you. Go and look at other podcasts. Go and look at your favorite podcasts, and you'll typically see that they have quite an extensive show notes page. So make sure that, because that's your opportunity, right? That's your opportunity to give additional information. Your newsletter, for example, if you have one, putting all that information there. So you're not just, spending that time, that post-production time is not just the technical part of editing. It's actually creating all these other assets. And then kind of Anisha was talking about this earlier as well, in terms of, repurposing that content. And then, how are you going to market this content? Because you uploading your episode to Apple Podcasts, okay, yeah, you may get discovered that way, but it's not the only way you're going to get discovered. So this is where you need to be on multiple places to try and make sure people know, hey, I've got a podcast, I've released an episode, I'm talking to this person this week, go and have a look at it. And one of the easiest and best ways to do that now, people still do this, but they used to be more popular. They used to create audio, what we call audiograms, right? So they'd have a snippet of the audio, and there'd be some kind of a picture of the person, and there'll be some sound waves, and you can hear a little clip from the episode, and that's great. But now you can put a video snippet out, right? You can put a short out, you can put a reel out. I mean, it's just so much nicer, I think, anyway, to see, oh, hey, look, this is the snippet from the conversation. And it then also gives you content, right? Because a lot of time when you talk about posting on social media, people go, I don't know what to post. One of the best things about podcasting, if you record a 60-minute episode, you can turn that into, months worth of content, right? You can take clips from it, you can take transcripts, you can turn that into blog posts, there's so much you can do. So you don't even have to think about creating separate content that you're going to post. You can just use what you've actually spent the time recording and just repurpose that one piece of content and kind of regurgitate it and put it out into the sphere. And then obviously you want to be on multiple platforms. We've talked about LinkedIn, but there's Instagram, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's your website. There's so many different places that you can be putting this content. So just get the name out there. Use and it's really free, isn't it? All these social media sites are free, and they want your content, but utilize that because they will push it out to the right people.
I'm going to say an old fogey statement here from a podcaster's perspective, the old fogey in the room, because I know I'm the oldest one on this podcast. And the old fogey is there are several rising AIs out there that are specifically tied into podcasting. And there's one, I cannot remember the name of it. So Sanjay or Anisha, if you know this, just shout it out when I describe this. But it will record your voice and you'll go through some exercises with it. And then you load in basically a paper or a document. And then you pick a guest voice, a woman's voice, a man's voice, and it creates a podcast for you based on your voice. And it's really AI. This is the old fogey. Do not do that, because here's the thing. If I find out you're doing that and it's in pharmacy, I will tell everybody that you're fake, and I'll call you fake news. I'll use the same expression that was used so much, 410 or 2 political thing, and people still say fake news. Hashtag fake news. So do not, if you want to podcast, do it. There's an element of intimacy between listeners and their hosts and podcasts, listening to voice inflections. And that's why I'm a transparent person. My metrics are transparent. My posts are all transparent. I talk from my heart. You can be technical, you can be, but please don't use AI to drop in, because I did listen to a couple of them because I was curious, and I even tried it on myself. You could definitely tell it was AI, but I don't even want to get to a point where AI becomes so good that I don't feel that I'm listening to a true living human being. And that's a whole nother podcast. We can get into philosophy per se, but don't go that route is my advice to you.
I 100% agree. I would say don't go that route with anything with AI, right? If you want to create a newsletter, for example, which we talked about, of course you can go on ChatGPT, write me a newsletter about X, Y, and Z, and it will give you something that looks and sounds amazing, but it's AI, it's not you. And listen, these technology companies are smarter than all of us put together, right? They know this. As I said, Google already are excluding what they seem as AI generated content. There are people creating, I went on to Wix, I think it was Wix the other day. It literally created an entire website for me, which it's not the one I've used, but I couldn't believe that I just pressed one button and the copy and pictures and everything was just there. And I was thinking, this can't be right? They're figuring this out, right? So I think use AI like a companion, like a PA, like as a tool. It is a tool. Don't use it to replace something. So the way that I like to use AI, I hate typing, so I like to say things a lot, and I like to talk, as people probably gathered from listening to me over these 3 episodes. I would just talk into my voice notes app, or I actually use Descript sometimes, and I'll just say, this is what's on my mind, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I want to talk about, and then I'll take that transcript and say, hey, make some sense of these words, because they've come from me, right? So it's using the words that have actually come from inside of me, inside of my head, and it's then rejigging those to make it sound coherent. It's not me saying, hey, I don't know what to talk about, but just, hey, write me something. That's not cool. I mean, people are out there doing it. I've been approached by so many video editors, podcast editors, video editors, offering me their services. And I go to their profile, I go to their Upwork or wherever they're looking, and I can just see everything they've put on there is AI generated.
Yeah.
And and I'm just like, hey, I'm not even going to engage the conversation because I can see what you're doing. So yeah, we're getting smarter about this. It's a tool, right? Use it as a tool.
Absolutely. Hey, we have to wrap up, but I do want to give a shout out to the listeners. This is the beginning. Expect additional series on the depths of podcasting and different things that we're going to talk about. I'd like to talk about marketing in a completely different series because I think marketing, business development, public relations, strategy, social media, that is a much more advanced discussion once we get past some of the technical. But Sanjay and Anisha, you have been wonderful to work with. We're going to do a lot more together in 2025. The name of the podcast is Pharmacist Diaries. It's available on all podcast platforms. It's an amazing podcast. You can find Sanjay and Anisha on LinkedIn. Their LinkedIn page is Behind the Mic. Just go up to the search bar, put Behind the Mic Anisha, or go to Anisha Patel, and you'll be able to find her profile and go to that. But this is a wonderful environment that you've both created to really help teach the professional, my favorite provider, the pharmacist, to get their podcast going and to support them. And then, like I said, you want to go to level 5, 10 in the strategy side. If you want to say, Todd, a strategist in podcasting, 1 to 10, I absolutely am a 10. I love, that's my favorite part, is strategy and branding and getting the message out and getting it listened to. We just hit 70,200 some listeners just for this month, and we see a trending upward, and it's just crazy. And I want to give a shout out to Million Podcasts. I want to say thank you for recognizing pharmacy. They gathered up the 80 best pharma podcasts, and Pharmacy Podcast was ranked as the number one. And the reason why we're number one is because it's not because of me, it's because of the collective. I think that's the sweet juice in the Pharmacy Podcast Network. It's the collective. It's people like Anisha that have ideas, and you understand the real world of pharmacy and what's going on, and you share that, and you open your heart up, and your podcasts are so good. So yeah, I'm excited what's happening in 2025, people.
Me too. Great being here, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Todd.
Very, very good to see you. This was This Week in Pharmacy with Anisha and Sanjay. And once again, to follow them, sign up for their newsletter. The newsletter is a really good source of information, and it's pure. It's not AI driven. It's from the heart. Behind the Mic. Go to behindthemic.anishaandsanjay.com. And we are thanking everyone that listened to this 3-part series. Once again, part 1 and part 2 will be gathered up and put on a blog. We're going to remarket that, repush that out there. And that's it. Be on the lookout for other podcast depths. We're going to go into a lot this year, and I'd like to form a masterclass for podcasters in pharmacy too. So be on the lookout for more stuff from our team. And thank you both for doing this.
Welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Peace out.